MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome. Protect yourself at all times. We are ready to go once again with another Mystery Wire podcast, and the gang is all here. And welcome, everybody. Glad we all made it through and doing well. We've got George Knapp here, Matt Adams. He is labeled as Ian Russell on this if you're seeing the video of it, but that's Duncan Phoenix because you're using Ian's computer. Got that. And I'm Ron Futrell. But welcome. First, let's start out, George, just a general, what you've been up to lately, and surviving the Rona. We're all trying to survive through this. Got masks if we need to. I think we're okay. We're in separate locations, so we don't need these masks today. But how have you been, George?
I'm good. I'm at home. You can see the mess behind me. It's the same mess that's always here, like my office at KLAS. I've been working from home and, watching the world go up in flames. There's never a slow news day in Las Vegas, and it's especially true now.
No, it's been a little bit crazy, and it is indeed. And Matt, and you've been working hard at the station, still doing a lot of projects and keeping up on things here. Yes.
Yeah, things are sort of getting back to normal. Las Vegas is starting to get a little bit of a buzz back to it, and the non-essential workers are definitely back out on the road. So you got to watch your bumpers again. Just got back from a trip to Stephenville, Texas. A famous town for UFO sightings. I'm sure some people are aware of the Stephenville UFO cases, but I was out there for a visit with my parents, so I wasn't investigating any UFOs.
They were identified. Your parents, you can call them identified.
Yes.
And Duncan, with Mystery Wire now, what new things we've got going? I know the newsletter is now going strong, and that's being sent out to people. I'd encourage people to sign up online. Go to MysteryWire.com and sign up for the newsletter, but it's rocking too. Yes.
That's right. Yeah, right now we're doing that, sending out twice a week. It's going on Wednesday and Friday mornings right now. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're really focusing on a bigger piece, topical or archival. But right now, Wednesday, Friday, we'll hope to be expanding that soon. But yeah, go to our website, MysteryWire.com, sign up for that so that you can stay on top of it. We're just chugging away. I've been back in the newsroom for about a week and a half now, and got very tired of working from home, so I'm glad I'm back here. You can see it behind me. It's pretty quiet. It's the middle of the day. So it's good. It's good to be back.
Okay, and George, with some of the headlines, some of the news coming out lately, we're going to be talking to Danny Silva here in just a little bit, some of the interviews you've done with him, but what's some of the things that you could call breaking news in the paranormal UFO world over the last few months since the last time we've chatted?
There's a lot of stuff percolating under the surface, and I think we'll talk about it in greater detail after we hear from Danny Silva. There's the scuttlebutt is, if you follow UFO Twitter and the various personalities on that the New York Times is about ready to jump back into the UFO story. You'll recall in December of 2017, they break the story about the existence of a program called ATIP, which was a secret Pentagon-funded study of UFOs. We learned later that program actually was called OSAP, that it was a contract given to Bigelow Aerospace, a company, a subsidiary called BASS, founded by Robert Bigelow, which involved Skinwalker Ranch. It looked at UFOs around the world. It interacted with governments. And it really made a lot of progress, and then the funding was pulled from it, despite the efforts of its primary sponsor, Senator Harry Reid. Ever since that story broke in the New York Times, people have been looking for other bits and pieces of the overall story. What's going on in the UFO world? Is there in fact, a continuation of ATIP, some other form of ATIP? Is there a secret study going on? And we keep hearing bits and pieces, as we've reported on Mystery Wire, about the possibility that there are metamaterials being analyzed in labs around the world, bits and pieces that were picked up at crash sites, craft from somewhere else that crashed, that were scooped up by elements of the government and stashed in hangars and labs around the world, being analyzed, reverse engineered to figure out how this stuff works. We keep hearing those rumors over the years. the suggestion that was made to me in the last couple of weeks is the New York Times is finally pursuing that. And one of the pieces of paper to go along with this is a memo that we'll be discussing later in the program. It's an exciting time. I know that people in the UFO world who are new to the topic maybe are frustrated that it isn't faster, that we aren't learning stuff immediately, that, you know, President Trump doesn't come forward and drop the boom on us and pull back the curtain and let us see the flying saucers. Came close to it, I guess. Kind of teased us a little bit. But actually, a lot of progress has been made in the last 3 years, some of it right here on Mystery Wire. It's an exciting time for this topic and the broader spectrum of related issues, paranormal type phenomena. And I think we're going to see a lot more news in this venue before the end of the year.
And I do want to say we appreciate people that have taken the time to listen to the podcast here and also go through Mystery Wire material. We're seeing the effect of people being at home and watching fascinating stuff, interesting stuff, and looking into new things. And that, a big shout out and a big thank you to those of our supporters out there that have taken the time to listen and watch.
I want to add, Ron, you know, we haven't forsaken the podcast. And we haven't forsaken UFOs. We haven't done a lot of UFO stories on the website for a while. But with so much that's going on in the world, the pandemic, the economic problems, the unrest on the streets, the allegations about police violence, it just felt like a diversion to be focusing on this topic while so much is going on. But I think we're going to get back to that now, at least to be something else you can focus on instead of all the craziness that's going on in the world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, Danny Silva, let's chat about him and what the citizen journalist nowadays, and that can be a wide range of individuals that consider themselves citizen journalists. But Danny Silva is a guy who stood out, George, hasn't he? And what he's been able to do and succeed in this area. He's just got out there and grabbed it and done it and made a name for himself in the business.
Yeah, so the December 2017 New York Times story comes out. It catches everyone by surprise, most everyone anyway. And a lot of people who had never paid attention to the UFO issue suddenly were energized by it. They got interested, started to doing their, Matt, you're going to lose some papers there.
Yeah.
And they started doing their own research. And Danny Silva is one of those. He reached out and grabbed this topic by the throat, decided that he wanted in. He didn't want to wait for other people to give him stories. He was going to go after it himself. So he's one of several people like that. You see their work on UFO Twitter. They're arguing about this case and this witness and this document. They've developed their own network of sources, a lot of the names that are known in the field that we've interviewed over the years. And citizen journalism, because of social media, it's a relatively new sort of a development. I think it's healthy for the field. It's not just sitting around waiting for UFO poobahs to issue some kind of pronouncement about what is true and what isn't. They go after it themselves. And Danny has really made a mark for himself. He publishes something called the Silva Record. We interviewed him, I should say, 3 or 4 times because of some technical difficulties with the Zoom technology that we're all learning to deal with because of the pandemic. We had to break it up into chunks. So some of these interviews that we're about to see will be slightly different. You'll see us in different settings. You'll see a cat on the back of my chair in a couple of them. And anyway, we'll let you, Ron, introduce Danny because you asked him the first question, allowed him to introduce himself and tell the Mystery Wire audience who he is.
Okay, Danny Silva from Texas, Matt. So a guy not too far from probably where you were not that long ago, but a guy who's taken the paranormal, the UFO business interest, the topic, and really grabbed it, like you said, George, and has done a lot of interesting things. So let's go ahead and listen to the first interview that we've got. We're going to have 3 audio clips, 3 clips that you'll be able to see and also hear, depending on where you're watching this. But first one, with Danny Silva, introduce a little bit about who he is and what he does, and we're glad to have Danny join us, I guess you could say, in that sense, on our show. Glad to have you with us here, and tell us a little bit about yourself as a blogger, as a citizen journalist, as somebody who has covered and been very close to many of the things that George has been a part of, and now Duncan and I are involved with as well.
I've just been obsessed for the last few years since the ATIP revelations that came out in 2017. And it changed my life. I started writing and blogging and doing things I had never done before. Now I'm kind of throwing myself out there as a citizen journalist and trying to follow those journalistic standards and rules. And I'm just kind of learning as I go. And I have great role models around me, one of them being George Knapp. He set an example for us for a long time. And so I'm just trying to keep that going and in the best way I can from an amateur perspective, I guess you would say.
Hey, Danny, can you describe, for those who are not familiar with, say, UFO Twitter or the UFO world in general, what it's like? I mean, you put yourself out, you'll write an article, a blog, offer some opinions, interview people, put it up on Twitter or other kinds of platforms. What happens to you when you do something like that? What's the interaction process like? I have described it to colleagues here at Channel 8 and other places that it's pretty crazy at times and nasty.
It is crazy and nasty. At the same time, we're blessed to have social media and be able to, and have the internet, unlike generations before us. We're kind of taking advantage of these platforms in new ways, and we're able to blast out information probably quicker than anyone else ever could. At the same time, along with a lot of different aspects of the internet, whether it's sports or politics or whatever, it does get really nasty. You get a lot of haters. Anyone can comment anything they want from behind a keyboard, and some of it is okay and it's credible and it helps us move forward and think about different things. And then some of it is just pure hate and naysaying, and that's unfortunate. But it kind of comes with the territory now, especially in 2020 on the internet. No matter what you do when you put yourself out there, it's something you got to deal with now.
Lou Elizondo is someone you've got to know over the last 2 years a little bit. You interact with him, you communicate, you've written about him. There's a new piece today on Medium. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it calls itself, it's talking about the vindication of Lou Elizondo. And, in my dealings with him, I didn't think he needed vindication. I always felt he was a very credible guy, and that the attacks on his personal integrity, on his career, are completely unfounded and just came out of an sort of like turf wars by some of these UFO folks who want to climb to the top on his back by taking him down. Is that your perception?
I think so. And, coming from his background and some of the claims he made, I think, at first it was probably okay. And even now, in some ways, it's okay to vet what he's saying and look into him. At the same time, I think it is a lot of pure hate. And, the UFO community specifically, for a lot of years, they were just begging for any kind of person from the government. Lou doesn't consider himself a whistleblower, but they wanted a whistleblower from the government or just any type of a government official to come forward. It finally happened now. And then, you have all these people suddenly not trusting him. But it was exactly what those same people were asking for decades before that. So it's unfortunate to see. A lot of it, I think, the war has been won in a lot of ways because a lot of the naysayers have been proven wrong by people like you, George, and other journalists that are really digging in and doing it. But at the same time, if you Google Lou Elizondo, you not only see a lot of great articles and well-researched articles, you see a lot of crap that isn't well-researched, and you see just a lot of shots that are taken at him. So that's unfortunate. And his background is something that I'm going to continue to write about, and other people are going to continue to write about just to further prove what he did, since a lot of us believe him. I believe him, and I've actually been able to see some evidence. And I think you have too, George. And, basically, he did what he did, and not only has Harry Reid said it and other people, but it's happened, and unfortunately, some people just don't want to accept it.
So, Daniel, a lot of what happens in the UFO world, you have to really be into it to understand it, and it almost has its own language. You've been great about in writing your articles and what you express in various platforms online, and speaking in terms that everybody can understand. Your latest article, I'm not sure that the public, it's registered with how important it is. And it's based on something that sort of appeared out of the blue on social media a week or so ago from people, I think, who did not understand the significance of what they had. What is it, and what did you write about?
The public affairs officer, Susan Go, she works for the Office Under Secretary of Defense, or Office Secretary of Defense in the Department of Defense. They FOIA'd her emails. Freedom of Information Act, her emails came out, and it showed her communicating with other public affairs officers from the Air Force and other people. And basically they were talking about what to release and how to release it. So red flags came up immediately because, you know, those people aren't supposed to basically corral information or anything like that. They're especially with the FOIA, they're not FOIA officers. So they have to be, the FOIA has no opinion. If it's not classified and if it's not exempt, it's supposed to just come out to the public, and there isn't supposed to be any opinion involved. And they were kind of, you know, some people think they were colluding. You know, all this is allegedly. So, you know, what we want to do and what other people are trying to do is, originally I wanted to talk to lawyers and see what they think, but it kind of hit the Twitterverse, partially because of my big mouth. It was something I was working on in the background, and other people were working on it too. And so then I just wrote a primer basically in my blog about what was going on. But yeah, it doesn't look good as far as what they're doing. And all this is allegedly, but a lot of people feel this way, that what's going on just is unethical and maybe even unlawful.
So the Pentagon has decades of experience of lying, obfuscating, withholding information, distorting the truth. Now we've got one person who essentially, based on the emails that you've obtained, who's put herself in charge of whatever comes out of the Pentagon. And she says it in pretty clear language in the emails and memos that, look, anything that comes out anywhere, the Army, Navy, Air Force, anywhere, has to go through me. We need to all be on the same page, which kind of just thumbs, it's like flipping the bird to FOIA, which is in fact the law of the land.
Yeah, and it's odd. And before this happened, first off, the emails were obtained through FOIA by a researcher named Dean Johnson. But before this happened, months before that, it came out that, or maybe through those emails, but it came out that Susan Go was answering all the UAP questions. So before that, there was a lot of contradictory comments from different spokespeople, and it was a big mess, basically. They were saying one thing and another person would say another thing, and it just didn't make any sense. So in that regard, I understand it, but we're also wondering if it's unethical. Why are all these branches of government and agencies all going through one officer, basically?
Yeah, those who might not remember this, Ron, you and Duncan have followed this for a while, but the Pentagon, when the New York Times story broke in December 2017, they said, yeah, there was a program, ATIP, and yeah, it studied this stuff, UFOs, and it didn't find anything, so that's why it was closed down. Then months later, oh no, ATIP had nothing to do with UFOs. And by the way, Lou Elizondo didn't work for them. And you've got a lot of different conflicting stories.
Yeah, basically, it's more of this, these mixed messages coming from the Pentagon and coming from these spokespeople. At one point, they're saying that ATIP wasn't ran by Elizondo. Another point, they're saying ATIP wasn't about UFOs. It since came out that it was, or UAP as they call them, or AAVs, or whatever you want to call them. And it's just been a lot of mixed messages. It's been really unfortunate. Even this last release from a week or two ago about the Navy videos being re-released, there was misinformation mixed in. They were saying that they shouldn't have been released 2 years ago, even though Elizondo went through the DOPSR process. He got the approval from DOPSR. So it's just, it's spin.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that you look at the videos themselves, and since I released 2 sets of videos, Tic Tac videos, and what was the government still has no explanation when it comes down to it. Through all of this, they still, Danny, as far as I know, have given no explanation for what this is. Do you think so that being said, do you think they know and they just don't want to say? Can you speculate on that? Or does the government not know what these things were?
Well, there's two trains of thought. That it's some secret technology is one, and then the other train of thought is that it's somebody has this technology that maybe is a non-human intelligence or something like that. I'm not sure. I think they know whether they obviously have to know whether it's ours or not. I think they probably do know that it's not ours. That's what I lean towards.
Okay. Yeah.
But people are always also going to say that maybe it's Russian tech, secret Russian tech, and I guess we can't rule that out 100%. But a lot of, and I think other countries tech next these areas, off the coast. There, other countries do mess with our armed forces at times with drones and other things. But some of these craft, the technology they're displaying is just so crazy that surely it can't be human tech. And the line goes that it's so advanced, it's not one step ahead, it's like 20 steps ahead.
Now, and you couldn't have a government conspiracy with all these people involved, because there's too many people involved. Too many people saw what they saw and have gone on the record for what they saw on those flights. So you couldn't. It's not reasonable to think that everybody could be in on this and trying to cover something up or put something out there or use it for whatever nefarious purposes. I think it also defies logic that it would be another country, because we would know that. And by the way, they probably would have used it. So they would not be a country that would be friendly to us, most likely. And they would have probably used that sort of technology on us or on other people if they had it. So I'll go with the only other conclusion is we don't know, and it's still unidentified.
Right,
yeah.
What UFO means.
Yeah.
And even the Air Force has said that they don't think it's ours. There's been a lot of comments on and off the record of people saying that they don't think it's ours, basically. And
Danny, your conclusion: the government has said it's not theirs, for the most part.
Not a specific term. Well, I guess by saying that it's unidentified.
Right.
Yeah, in a way that they are saying it's not theirs. Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. So then you're trying to figure out what, where, and what the content of these videos are, I guess, is the main pressing question right now with everybody. Would that be safe to say? And your FOIA requests to try to get all that does is make it more mysterious to me, in light of what your article about the FOIA requests and the confusion around them and about them.
That was one question I had for you,
yeah.
Danny, is with the FOIA requests, with yourself, with other people putting those in, do you think there's a chance that at this point, at least with the videos, that there is more to be had out of that? I mean, there's a lot of illusions around it. We're just scraping the surface. Are you able to say if you're looking deeper into that? Have you heard any of that sort of talk?
I think there's more videos, definitely. We keep hearing rumblings about more videos. In fact, in Dean Johnson's FOIA emails with Susan Go, she's talking about an Air Force video, or at least alluding to one, which is pretty interesting. These videos, of course, came from the Navy. So what Air Force video is she talking about? But, just logically, there's going to be a ton more videos. These wouldn't be the only ones. We don't think that these are the videos in their entirety. These are cut clips of the larger videos. So there has to be other videos that they have of whatever you want to call them, UAP or whatever else.
It's interesting. Danny does not have any formal journalism training, but in reading his stuff in the Silva Record, he's really careful about what he writes. He sources it, he double sources it, double checks on the information, is really careful about not exaggerating the content that he writes about. He double checks with a variety of people whom he trusts in the field, and it's doing really good work. I mean, for a guy who does not have formal training, he does really good work. You can sense his frustration in dealing with the Department of Defense, the same thing that a lot of us have dealt with, have felt over the years in trying to get a straight story. Ever since that New York Times story came out, they said ATIP never really studied UFOs, and it ended in years ago. It's completely gone. It never found anything interesting. we now know that all those statements were untrue. So the Pentagon has repeatedly had to backtrack on previous statements, has contradicted itself multiple times, and it's really frustrating to try to get a straight story out of. I'm probably sure you guys feel the same way. Matt, I know you've dealt with that.
Yeah, he's really come out of nowhere and has done a really good job navigating these waters. I mean, he's filing FOIAs, he's doing investigations that professional journalists aren't even doing these days. It's amazing to see his work and the high quality of work that he does. And he's broken some really big stuff that we're going to capitalize off of as well. He's helped the whole field along. One thing that he touches on in that interview is this social media battlefield that we're in right now, and it's everywhere. It's not just in the UFO world. It's in politics. It's in everything. But it's especially ugly in the UFO world. And he's learned how to navigate that pretty well too. And it's not easy. It's really not. He sticks to the facts. He doesn't let things get sidetracked. And that's really what a lot of people want to do, is they just want to sidetrack you. They want to argue something that they want to argue the negative and not come up with a real positive solution to the mystery.
And that's one thing that we're hoping to accomplish with not only this podcast, the website Mystery Wire, and talking with y'all on social media is to create a conversation, not a fight, not an argument. We might have disagreements, but it's good to talk it out, even if it is on Twitter or Facebook or wherever else. And Danny, I got to know him just through doing these interviews with the group here, and he seems like a very good, genuine guy. He knows his stuff. He's done his homework. And like George was saying, he is double and triple checking. So I got trust in this guy.
Well, whenever George was at the 2019 UFO MegaCon conference in Laughlin, we have a video clip of him on our YouTube page. George really dives into the social media landscape and does a really good job of laying it out there for what we need to do to move forward and do it in a serious way and not always sniping at each other. It's an awesome power to have, to be able to share things, to be able to comment on things. It's great in so many ways, but it's poisonous.
One thing that Danny's been able to do is, like George, you were alluding to, getting sources, getting friends, trusted associates. And just this past couple of months, he might have stepped upon talk of a new government program, right?
Yeah, so we've reported this before on Mystery Wire. The I-Team has done these stories starting in 2018 after the New York Times story came out, where we interviewed Senator Harry Reid, Bob Bigelow, Dr. Hal Puthoff, Dr. Eric Davis, and a number of other people, Lou Elizondo in particular, Tom DeLonge, about whether or not ATIP was canceled, as the Pentagon said, or whether there's a program that goes on. And of course, all of those people have indicated to us, as we have reported, that there is in fact an ongoing program that studies UFOs, that looks into military encounters. We've heard of some pretty dramatic incidents in recent years. The Tic Tac was way back in 2004, but that other video, the gimbal video, is from 2015 off the East Coast. And as we have reported from really well-placed sources, there have been dozens of those encounters off the East Coast, U.S. warplanes encountering these strange craft that are unidentified. A lot of people didn't want to believe it, but it is true, and it is being studied. There is a program, and Danny has developed his own sources. One of the stories that he broke recently, or has expanded on, is whether or not there really is this new program, and if so, where it might be, and maybe we'll go into that, as well as a recent case 11 months ago that happened in the same place where the Tic Tac case happened. Here it goes. Danny, the last time we were talking, you were sharing with us some of the back and forth dealing with FOIA requests with the Department of Defense spokesperson who handles all UFO, UAP related information. That's kind of a hit or miss proposition there, as you know, and other researchers know. But she did release some material recently, surprising answers to some questions submitted, and you wrote an article about it. It seems that the Department of Defense has confirmed there is, in fact, an ongoing UFO investigation.
Yeah, she I don't know if it was because she had her back against the wall, Susan Go, from that past experience and some of these other times that she messed up, and maybe she was throwing us a bone. I'm not really sure. But she was in communication with Roger Glassell, a researcher, and it was an extended communication. But the parts that stuck out for me, I have the exact quotes right here, are under the cognizance of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, there is an interagency team charged with gathering data and conducting investigations into range incursions. And then she went on to say the investigation of UAP sightings by the multi-agency task force is ongoing. And that's something we've been hearing from Lou Elizondo. He said it in Unidentified Season 1 that it was multi-agency. It's still being run out of OUSDI, but multi-agencies are chipping in. So this is big to me, and this was almost bigger news than some of the other things that have caught fire over the last year. And knowing, I think if the public knows that there's a current UAP effort going on, to me that should kind of change their mindset, because a lot of the reporting on ATIP when it came out in the New York Times, they were saying it ended, even though we knew that wasn't true from what Elizondo was saying. But so to me, it kind of changes the mindset of the public. And I've heard that it will never happen, but I would really love for some of these directors of these new programs to come forward and we could put a face to the name. And I think that would really change things from a PR aspect.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath on that, but you're right. I remember the first interview we did with Lou Elizondo early in 2018. He had talked about an ongoing program. I had reported the same thing from various sources for the I-Team and from Mystery Wire saying, yeah, there's an ongoing program. I think since the time that we first reported it in 2018 and now, it's in a much stronger position. I mean, it has, what I understand, it has a budget. It has there's a structure to it that didn't exist before. When Lou, as he's described to you, I'm sure, Danny, when he was in charge of that thing, he was sort of the central connection point for various agencies. It was kind of a loose confederation instead of a program. My sense of it now is it is an actual program. What do you hear?
I have heard that it's funded. It was reported places, and I was able to confirm it somewhere else, that the person that is currently running it was promoted. So his current level was higher than Elizondo was at the time. So that's promising. I don't know how big the funding is, but it sounds like it was probably more funding than it was also. So it's positive movement. And since all these other agencies are chipping in, it sounds great. And now, I mean, I'm sure this probably isn't the only program, but I'm speculating there. But just to have this one, and we're hearing about it, and it's a little bit more open, it's a great thing.
It's kind of a mixed bag, the FOIA request. For so long, it went into a black hole. You ask the Department of Defense or CIA about UFOs, you get some form letter in response. And since the New York Times story came out, the Department of Defense has at least responded to questions. Often the answers are contradictory. They conflict with earlier statements from the same agencies. But it's at least good to see a two-way level of communication. Would you agree? Even if the information given is often proven to be wrong.
Yeah, it is good. Some of these researchers have done a really good job about opening up communication. Of course, Susan Go is the only person dealing with the UAP issues. Now, I should say we believe that the current program that's been confirmed is UFO, but she describes it as UAP. So there is that debate on, are they talking about drones or are they talking about, classical UFOs? But whatever it is, there's things flying around in the sky, no matter who's piloting them or who's controlling them. And they're doing range incursions. So that's, I think, the bottom line here, and that's maybe what mainstream reporters can latch onto, no matter who is in control of them. But yeah, the contradictory statements are always a problem, but the fact that the communications are open is at least good. And now people might say I'm picking and choosing, that I'm believing her when she says this, but not really, because it's what Elizondo's been saying all along. So we've been able to confirm it. So it's a little bit different than something she just kind of put out.
This spokesperson, we also saw some leaked communications, communications between her and other departments of the military, in which she sort of asserts control over what is said by other departments, the Air Force, the Army, whatever. She's put herself with help at the helm and has told everyone else, look, your stories have to confer with mine. What did you make of those emails and exchanges?
That was FOIA'd by a researcher named Dean Johnson. And, it set off a lot of red flags. I originally wanted to get lawyers involved or try to find someone that can speak from, someone that isn't me, a blogger with more legal experience or more experience with the government. I wasn't able to do that, but I think people are still trying to. It set off a lot of red flags. I don't know if what she did was illegal or if it was unethical or if it was perfectly normal. It may have been okay, but it seemed odd, to say the least. It seemed unethical as an outsider. I'm an outsider looking in, that she was basically trying to corral these things. And if she's trying to thwart FOIA, which was a phrase I used in my blog, that's definitely bad. There's different avenues of oversight that can go into these. And I'm hoping that some of these oversight avenues are taking a look at some of these FOIA emails from her. I'm sure that she wasn't expecting those emails to come out. They were kind of off the cuff. And we got to see a glimpse of how they were just speaking to each other when they thought no one was listening.
Since Tic Tac, Gimbal, Go Fast, those 3 videos came out, they've since been confirmed absolutely by the Pentagon a couple of times. And a lot of folks have been hoping that there would be additional UFO videos to come out. I personally don't think that's going to happen, but we continue to hear, people like you, me, who investigate this stuff, continue to hear about incidents, encounters between unknown craft with amazing technical capabilities and U.S. military units, in particular off the East Coast. Not much in the way of video proof for those things, but we've heard about it. Now, you've recently written about another encounter of much more recent vintage, a year ago, coming in July, right?
Yeah, it was the USS Kidd. It was a great story researched by Dave Beatty, and who did the Nimitz Encounters videos. He once he put out that film on YouTube, he put out an email, and he started getting a lot of veterans contacting him. So in this case, basically, someone contacted him. They were talking about the Nimitz event originally, the USS Chaffee, and they were saying that the Chaffee was also involved during that time in December rather than November, and that they were getting, they sent out an intercept basically for the Tic Tac. So that was interesting. And then the Navy vet, who's unnamed, went on to say that he had heard the USS Kidd in July of 2019 had a very close encounter where there was Tic Tacs hovering, very close to the ship. People were able to see them with their naked eyes. It wasn't like they were sending up planes to chase them, or they may have, but they didn't have to in order to see them. So that's an interesting story. It was only one source. Generally investigators want to have more than one source. But then Dave Beatty was able to FOIA the deck logs. So what's interesting about the deck logs is they were utilizing Snoopy teams during that week at various times. What's interesting about the Snoopy teams is they basically are intel groups that are always on the ship, and they basically videotape or gather intelligence of the drones or UFOs or flares or whatever they might see, and they send it to Office of Navy Intelligence with a very quick turnaround. So were those Snoopy teams in use, and it was just a coincidence, or was it training, or were they actually looking at this UFO that this Navy vet was describing? That's what we're trying to figure out right now.
I imagine a bunch of new FOIA requests have been filed based on that.
Yeah, I think people are going crazy with it. Dave Beatty is doing it. It's just really interesting. And hopefully now that I wrote the blog and this story has come out, maybe we'll get some other Navy vets from that time. One thing we had going for us with the Nimitz event is a lot of those people were retired. So because it was many years ago, but with this USS Kidd, probably a lot of the people aren't retired. So I don't know if they're going to be at liberty to speak, but maybe they could do it off the record, or maybe we'll just be able to kick some dust up and find out, because we just need more of these Navy events or any kind of military events to push this thing forward and get more people interested. We know that there's been a lot more other than the Nimitz and other than the 2015 East Coast events.
And this,
So uncovering more and more of these it's where it's at.
and this kid incident was in Southern California as well? Same area?
Yes, sir. Yeah, and it was also right by the Nimitz where that happened. So it makes it very interesting. I mean, who knows what happened over there? But it's a hot spot supposedly.
Had you ever heard the term Snoopy Team before?
I hadn't, and I'm no expert on what goes on with the Navy and a lot of this stuff. I hadn't. Interestingly enough, a lot of other experts hadn't either. But you talk to Navy people, and they have. So Navy people were pretty familiar with it. It's really interesting. It sounds like a cool job. I don't think they do that exclusively. They have other duties on the ship probably. And then if they need to, they get woken up in the middle of the night and they have to go up to the top of the ship and start filming.
So, I mean, the two big takeaways from that segment of the interview with Danny is, number one, he verifies with his information and sources that there is, in fact, an ongoing Pentagon study of UFOs. It may not be called ATIP. We don't know what the name of it is. We don't know exactly who's in charge, but it is an ongoing effort. It's happening right now. They take the topic very seriously. That's a really big deal. The second thing is talking about this incident with the USS Kidd, a very tic-tac sounding type craft in pretty much the same location with the original tic-tac incident. The existence of this thing called the Snoopy Team, I'd never heard of that term before. Duncan, you want to fill it in?
I hadn't heard of that either, and I'm not former military. I have not been in. I do have a nephew who's in Navy. Never mentioned that. Of course, he's not allowed to mention much, but yeah, fascinating. And so in this one, it's not just a single pilot seeing this. It's people just standing around on their ship, watching this thing up there. It's remarkable, and like we were saying before, Danny's got some pretty good sources. He's citing some very reliable sources. There's got to be more out there, and I know he is. I know we are. A lot of people are trying to get to it.
These kind of. Go ahead.
Doesn't it just make sense? I mean, logic. I'm going to go to the logic point of view that the government, if they scrap one program, they're not going to scrap the whole. In this sense, with something as critical as this issue of trying to find out what these objects are, these unidentified objects are, it would be absolutely foolish, and we can all make cases for government being foolish, but I don't think that it's stupid to be able to not have. My point, to not have some sort of system set in place to be able to investigate these charges on these unidentified flying objects. There has to be. I mean, logic would tell you that. Besides, the facts now are bearing that out as well. You might change the name. It might not be ATIP, might be different names to it all the time, but that there has to be an ongoing government program in this.
Well, we know that through the emails that Danny had FOIA'd, Susan Go talks about an Air Force video. So we know there's another video because we don't see Air Force videos. The 3 videos that have been released so far are from the Navy. So just via those documents alone, we know there's at least one other video shot by the Air Force.
At some point, he or someone was saying how it's not just that relatively short clip that the Pentagon has put out. This lasted for quite a length of time. It didn't just come and go like that. There's more. There's more.
You'll recall that Lou Elizondo said from the very first interview that we did with him back in early 2018 that there is a program, that ATIP did not end, that it was always underway. I think that there was a level of a program at that point. Since then, it's been expanded. It has a budget. It has a command structure. It's recruited personnel into it. It's more of a structured program and is a higher authority in charge of it than what Lou is. Now, Lou has said that, and he's taken all kinds of lumps from debunkers and various media critics and self-appointed UFO experts. But in fact, it looks like pretty much everything he said can and has been verified. And this statement that Danny referenced that was given to another UFO investigator who filed a FOIA request, she says flat out that under the cognizance of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, USDI, there is an interagency team charged with gathering data and conducting investigations into range incursions. Well, that's what they'll say. Of course they study this stuff. How could they, whether there was, you call it ATIP or whatever, you have an unknown craft entering U.S. military airspace over sensitive installations, playing cat and mouse games with nuclear carrier groups or nuclear missile bases, things of that sort. Of course you gather information about that. Of course you study it. You'd be derelict in your duty if you didn't. You know, Jacques Vallée, one of the things we posted on Mystery Wire a couple of weeks ago was a series called UFOs, the Best Evidence, included an interview with Jacques Vallée, Dr. Vallée, a famed astrophysicist and UFO investigator and author, who said, look, it makes sense that somewhere there is a giant building filled with UFO information, for the simple reason that our government, our military, has the sensor systems. They have satellites and radar systems and other sensors that collect information all over the globe. And occasionally UFOs pop up in there and they put it somewhere and somebody studies it. Where that is, we just don't know. But in all likelihood, it's always been that way, even if they didn't have a specific structured a belly button where all this information went to. So that's a pretty remarkable development. And I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't been given more coverage in mainstream media. Maybe that's one of the things the New York Times will be looking at going forward.
Right.
Well, they continue to use the word unidentified, and when the government uses a word, the definition, it has meaning. Words aren't just out there floating around. Unidentified means they do not know what it is. Professional debunkers have come out. They've looked at the Go Fast video, and professional debunkers, that's what they do. That's all they do. They don't prove things right. That's not what they get into. And a friend of ours, Jeremy Corbell, did a really good takedown of the debunking of the cold seagull, which they were calling it, which was the Go Fast. That two pilots, you hear them talking about it as they're targeting it. The people who study these radar and study these FLIR camera footage, the Pentagon still says they are unidentified, but a certain debunker comes out and says, oh, it's a cold bird. Well, Jeremy does a great job of saying, well, listen, we know that a seagull is 105 Fahrenheit. Like, we know this. We know the surface of the ocean is around 68 degrees. So whatever this was flying over the ocean was colder than the ocean. So it was not a seagull. And he goes through a bunch of other points that really just disprove this attempt to debunk this case.
And it seems like it sometimes takes someone just to say something that straightforward, that simple, like, well, no, of course it's not that. It can't be that, And now, George, you were talking about the data being collected somewhere. It has to be. You're right. It has to be. Maybe it's in a data center, upstate or something like that. But there's also, within the past year, been talk about this 15-page document here that talks about physical things being collected. What can you tell us about this, George? You know what this is.
Yeah, they call it the Davis-Wilson memo or Wilson-Davis memo. So you'll recall before ATIP, before OSAP, before BASS, there was something called NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. It was created in the mid-1990s, I think 1995, by Robert Bigelow, billionaire businessman who's interested in these subjects, based here in Las Vegas. He put together a science advisory board comprised of a terrific world-class group of scientists, investigators, former government folks. Among them was Dr. Edgar Mitchell, scientist, sixth man to walk on the moon, a brilliant man. There was another scientist and astronaut who was on that board. Harry Reid sat in on meetings. There were former CIA guys, physicists, a lot of really high-powered folks who were trying to get to the bottom of the UFO mystery. One of the people who was hired by NIDS is a physicist named Dr. Eric Davis, who has worked closely with Hal Puthoff, a world-renowned scientist. Dr. Davis worked for NIDS. He also was involved in the investigation of Skinwalker Ranch. And among the things that NIDS was trying to do was to connect with people in the government, people who were still inside at a high level in the military, who may have heard bits and pieces about the UFO mystery. And, the big story, the big question is, do we have pieces of these things? Do we have recovered craft? That's the story that was told by Bob Lazar about Area 51. It's the one that we pursued for more than 30 years now. And we hear tantalizing hints that there are materials that are sitting in vaults, that are in labs being analyzed, that maybe you have entire crafts stashed somewhere that we're trying to reverse engineer it and figure out this technology. As Senator Reid told us when Matt and I interviewed him a couple times, look, this is an important national security issue. Whoever gets that technology first wins. That's it. If you have anti-gravity, if you have something like the Tic Tac that you can fly, you only need one of them. You win, period. So we have to get there, Senator Reid said, before the Russians and the Chinese do, or we're in big trouble. So there is a program to look at that. There are these rumors for a long time about metamaterials and crash sites and crash recovery teams. So Dr. Eric Davis, back in, I think it was 2002, while working for NIDS, has a rendezvous with Admiral Wilson, who was, pretty high up there guy, to talk about what Admiral Wilson may know regarding crash retrieval programs and the analysis of metamaterials. And Danny Silva helped fill us in on some of the details about that memo. This broke several months ago, but it continues to generate new little bits and pieces. It deals with what's known as the Wilson-Davis document. Can you first explain to our audience not familiar with it what the Wilson-Davis document is and what the significance of it is?
Basically, there was a meeting, allegedly, in the late 90s between Stephen Greer, Edgar Mitchell, an astronaut who was the sixth man to walk on the moon, and government officials. They talked about it for decades, and they said that this government official was told by them, they briefed him, that where some of these UFO programs may be located, some of the things that were going on, and then this government official went to look and was basically told to kick rocks. But he was also given a little bit of info, but also told he didn't have a need to know. And so it was kind of a big rumor. It was more than a rumor because Edgar Mitchell was talking about it on television for decades. Then finally, allegedly the name of the person came out, Admiral Wilson. And people like Richard Dolan have seen maybe 1 or 2 pages of this document over the years. I don't think he was able to keep it. And finally it leaked last year. It leaked on the internet. A few of us noticed it. We didn't know what the heck to do with it. I was asking around about it. I was trying to figure it out if it was real. I believe it was real according to sources. Now I can't prove that. I can't prove it's real by any means. But just from what I'm hearing from lots of different people, they believe it's real, and these are people that I trust. Now, we don't know everything that these intelligence managers, basically, or these program managers, we don't know everything that they told Admiral Wilson was accurate. There's some interesting info in there and some very debatable info. But I do believe that the meeting happened and the document is accurate, and that Dr. Eric Davis, who's a legend in the UFO field, that he did take these notes and that it did occur. A lot of people are debating that. In the UFO community, it's always a big debate on everything that comes out, and this is, definitely a debate. But so now there's details in this document, and it basically shows that the same story that we keep hearing, that maybe some of these UFO programs are hidden in private industry, they're away from government, even though they may have some government funding, but they're away from prying eyes, they're away from FOIAs, and it's just this story we keep hearing over and over again. And when I keep hearing stories from different people that don't necessarily get along, all these different sources, that some of them hate each other, and they're all saying the same thing, I have to believe it when it's coming from all these different places.
So this Eric Davis is a very plain-spoken guy, PhD scientist, has held numerous security clearances, very interesting and brilliant man, has a meeting with Admiral Wilson, and they discuss a variety of different things, scuttlebutt programs, recovered technology, and basically alien materials, things of that sort. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, in no uncertain terms. They're talking about, he's asking them about abductions, and the manager says abductions don't occur, which threw a lot of people for a loop that believe in that kind of thing. He's talking about crash retrieval programs, which is really the meat of the subject. If we're able to find some sort of a crash retrieval program, or that comes out in the media, it'll maybe be game over. and a lot of other things. He names a lot of specific areas where this stuff could be located. And it's been out for about a year. You know, a lot of people thought it would enact disclosure, UFO disclosure right away. I didn't think so. I wasn't really agreeing with that. But it might lead to something. I mean, there may be leads in there that investigative journalists can latch onto, and it may break something. I don't know. But regardless, it shows us, if it's true, once again, kind of behind the scenes, how this stuff is working and how it's hidden.
At the time this conversation allegedly took place, Dr. Eric Davis was working for NIDS, for Bob Bigelow, working with Colin Kelleher, with Hal Puthoff. The meeting supposedly took place here in Las Vegas, outside the terminal where EG&G used to have its own terminal near the airport. And, you know, those guys that are allegedly involved in this certainly travel in those circles. They were interested in these topics. So it makes a lot of sense that they would want to have that kind of a conversation with someone like Admiral Wilson. But it was never supposed to see the light of day, assuming that it's real. How did it come forward, and what have the participants said about it?
The story goes, all allegedly, of course, that it was in Edgar Mitchell's files, the astronaut. It was in his files, in his office or somewhere. And, you know, back then, they weren't doing as many emails like we're doing today, where everything's electronic and it gets deleted. So he had papers, as far as I understand. There's other documents that also came out of his office. So I believe it did come out of there. I think there was a letter from Bigelow to him. There were some other documents that were highly debated. But so it came out of his office. He passed away. His family got a hold of it, and they gave it to some UFO researchers. I guess is how you could boil it down. So it's very plausible, and it's very believable.
And Eric Davis has said no comment. That's it, right? He hasn't said it's not true. He just says no comment.
Yeah, and also more than that, even he's saying that he can't talk about classified things, or he can't talk about ongoing programs. And Dr. Hal Puthoff kind of reiterated that same thing. So you would think, you know, and this is all speculation, it's pure speculation, but you would think that if it was all fake, they would just say it's fake. They wouldn't say they can't talk about it.
Admiral Wilson says it's fake, right? He came out, Billy Cox contacted him. It's a reporter in Florida, a columnist. He contacted him in the last couple of days and wrote about it.
Admiral Wilson adamantly denies it. He has actually denied it other times, and recently he just did again, and it threw a lot of people for a loop. A lot of people are confused. The other thing, in the document itself, he says if it ever comes out, he will deny it.
Yeah.
And, you know, there is debates on the document itself. It's not without issues. There's certain things that people are bringing up that don't make sense about the document. But, you know, I'm hoping that it's just prosaic explanations on some of these little details. And if we weren't there, it's hard to explain them away. But Admiral Wilson denies it. So that's one of the big things that debunkers are latching onto, and rightly so, because the main character in the notes is denying it. That was one of the things I thought too, that in order for this document to really, really catch on and be a beast, Admiral Wilson would have to come out and say it's accurate and true. But the thing is, why would he? You know, he's an older gentleman. He's retired, I think now, and there's no motivation for him to do so, get himself in trouble, break trust. I don't know if he was even supposed to have that meeting in the first place. I mean, it took place in a car, allegedly. So, you know, I don't know if he was kind of frustrated that he was told to kick rocks by the government guy and he wanted to vent. I'm just speculating, but I'm not sure if he was kind of bending the rules in order to even have that conversation. But, you know, it doesn't seem like he would be motivated to say that it's real and authentic.
You know, you look at the big picture, as with everything else on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, people gripe and complain. There's not enough information. There's nothing new. This is the same old stuff. I'm tired of hearing this. Then you look at the broad scope of UFO history and how little progress has been made for so long. And suddenly in the last 3 years, less than 3 years, we've got ATIP, OSAP, TTSA, Elizondo stepping forward, the Wilson Davis documents, all kinds of FOIA releases, additional cases that have come forward. It's a pretty exciting time for someone like yourself who's covering the subject matter. It doesn't seem like there's ever a slow news day.
It's really amazing. And, you know, I was always interested in UFOs, but I was on the sidelines. I was listening to you on Coast to Coast and other people, and I was just a fan. And once ATIP happened, it just totally changed me. And I think it changed a lot of people. You know, debunkers are saying, well, why is there all this influx of people? Well, of course there is. There's huge news coming out. So it motivated me to start writing and start looking into this. And, I went from a fan to someone who was able to dig into this and just get more info for myself. But it's also the whole "what have you done for me lately" syndrome. And a lot of people get bored or get discouraged with the progress. And it's only been like 2.5 years or something. Even when ATIP first came out, there was only one little mention in the New York Times about metal alloys being studied. And now there's this huge To the Stars Academy Atom project, and they're doing these credas with the Army to study materials. I mean, this is alleged UFO material. And other people are doing it, like Jacques Vallée and Dr. Gary Nolan. So it's an incredibly exciting time. And if you look back just a few years ago, even the material studies weren't even in the UFO community's, vocabulary of something that could actually occur on paper. So the progress that's been made is amazing, and it's just really crazy. And then 15 years from now, I think we're going to look back at this time as just really insane and fast moving and fast paced and historic.
Danny, tell our Mystery Wire listeners and audience where they can find your work.
Silvarecord.com. It's SILVARECORD.com. I'm on all social media, Silva Record, and I'm just digging into it like any other person. I've been able to contact some people, but other than that, I'm just a fan and I'm obsessed with it. And I try to stay up on anything that's going on recently, and it's just a fast-moving news cycle. So if you're interested in that, you can check out the website.
Well, there was also an article recently that somebody spoke with Admiral Wilson, and he is in complete denial that he even met Eric Davis. But what's interesting about this leaked letter and the notes that Eric has taken is just how detailed they are. A lot of it is he talks about facial expressions and how angry he was. And can you imagine being the person that has to tell an admiral of the Navy, no, you cannot come in here. We have nothing to show you, and we can't even talk about it. That would not be a position I'd want to put myself in.
And what's interesting is talk about how he's denying this. In this document, he, assuming this is correct, he lays out that he will deny it. If he's ever approached about it, he will say it never happened. He will say this never existed, this never took place. And so is he doing exactly what he said he would?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. He would have
Yes.
to. He'd be in legal trouble. He'd probably be fired. He'd be in legal trouble if he were to admit that this had actually happened. It sort of reminds me of the old Mission Impossible TV series, the intro, the secretary will disavow any knowledge of your activity kind of a thing. That's what they are trained to do. Interestingly enough, Eric Davis has been asked multiple times if this is real or not. His answer is no comment. I think that is telling. I'll just tell you this.
Yes.
I think that this, and I am fairly certain that this is an accurate representation of a meeting that really did happen. It was typed up, not to distribute to the public, but to share with a very tight group of professionals and the NIDS Science Advisory Board. Among them was Dr. Edgar Mitchell. It looks like Dr. Edgar Mitchell, after he died, his personal papers got into the hands of members of his family and then have dribbled out to the UFO community. And I think that's where this came from. This meeting happened. Admiral Wilson denies it. I think he'll always deny it. Dr. Eric Davis is not somebody who makes this stuff up. He certainly doesn't make it up and then hand it to his boss, Bob Bigelow, and the Science Advisory Board, made up out of whole cloth. You may not believe that the contents of what is discussed in this meeting is true, and we have no way to verify if all this is true or not. But did the meeting take place? Yes, it did. And this memo is an accurate reflection of what happened. I think that, remember at the beginning of this podcast, we talked about the New York Times poking around. Part of what they're poking around about is this memo. Is it true? Does somebody have metamaterial stashed in a hangar somewhere or in a lab? Are they investigating it? Are they trying to figure it out? It's the most enticing part of the UFO mystery, other than who are these beings and where are they from and why are they here? If you could have physical evidence that it came from somewhere else, that we are taking apart and trying to figure out how it works, that's an indication it's not ours. It came from somewhere else, And that is sort of the holy grail. That would change the whole debate. If the New York Times goes ahead with that story, even if they aren't able to prove it definitively, that's a really big deal.
Well, not to take the wind out of the New York Times sails, but didn't you just have Hal Puthoff on your radio show not too long ago? And he pretty much confirmed that we have metamaterials. We don't know where they came from. And he has placed his hands on those materials. So, I mean, the New York Times they're just doing a follow-up to one of your coast-to-coast shows.
Well, it is true. We had Hal Puthoff on a radio show with Eric Davis. He said there have been crashes. There is material that's being analyzed. Eric Davis said there have been multiple crashes of unknown vehicles. That is a fact, that the military has been studying it, that there is a crash retrieval program. And that is reflected in this memo, as well as other work that those guys have done. It was one of the primary functions that NIDS had while it still existed, is trying to get to the bottom of that. In addition, you'll recall, Matt, that Hal Puthoff made insinuations along those lines here in Las Vegas. He made a presentation at the URBA conference, SSE conference here in Las Vegas in, was it 2018? The summer of 2018. So it's 2 years ago this month. And he basically laid it out. There are materials that are being analyzed, and the insinuation is they came from crashes of unknown objects. That should be worldwide news. That should be front page news. So we're glad the New York Times is getting around to following it up.
Or anyone else.
One thing
I'll go back even further. And George, you mentioned it earlier in this podcast, but it is a recurring theme, certainly, and one that Bob Lazar 30 plus years ago first talked about, very specifically about some of the material and what it was and what it could do. And so it's not, this is not breaking news, although sort of it is when everybody else catches up.
Well, a lot of the people who are involved with this don't want to believe Bob Lazar. They feel he's been discredited. That's fine with them. But they have a hard time reconciling that position with all the things that he said that they now believe to be true. That there is a program that retrieved this material, that it's being studied in secret, that there are unknown materials of extraterrestrial origin that we cannot create or duplicate, that essentially creates anti-gravity. Those craft, Tic Tac, Gimbal, maybe Go Fast, demonstrated technology that we do not have. It is in essence anti-gravity. It's not something we've been able to master. A lot of people insinuate online that, yeah, it's ours. Well, we've been having these flying saucers demonstrating these kinds of capabilities for the last 70 years that we know of, and probably throughout recorded human history. Has the Pentagon been keeping it secret from the 1940s on? Because if so, that's a pretty big story by itself. It sort of leads us to the discussion of President Trump. Did you hear him last night, Ron?
That's right.
Yes,
yeah. Go ahead.
I didn't sign up to listen to his. Okay, so it's Donald Trump Jr. with the president, his father, talking about the UFO issue and aliens. It was used as a little bit of, I think, a fundraiser, and also I had to put I stopped it when they wanted my phone number. Okay, and I'm guessing that the president wants my phone number. He could probably find it from somebody somewhere.
You're on a couple lists.
Yeah, so I didn't see it, although it did intrigue me what was said there in Junior talking to his dad about aliens, UFOs.
Well, let me sum up the answer I saw this morning. The clips being pushed around. I threw it out on Twitter, on the Mystery Wire Twitter feed. To sum it up, the president said what you'd expect him to say. He said, we'll see. That's interesting. He didn't deny it. He didn't say, there's nothing to that. He just, he did what he probably should do and just didn't say anything, which maybe is saying a lot. In fact, I've seen a couple of comments on that since he didn't deny it and he didn't say that it doesn't exist, is that the answer? And again, it's campaign, but it is nonetheless words from the President of the United States. Politics aside, that's the president addressing this topic. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it was a little disappointing. They were clearly talking about Area 51, and they were saying Roswell. And, you know, when you jump into this and you start saying aliens, and that's something Harry Reid's always been adamant about. It's like, let's not talk about little green men. Let's talk about what we know is that there are unidentified things flying through the air. We don't have to get to the aliens right now. Let's just talk about that. Are there UFOs? The answer is yes. They've already admitted that. So we don't know where they come from. So I really don't know what people were expecting to hear from DJ TJ and his dad, but I found it kind of disappointing, really. It didn't do much for anybody, and then the fact that they don't even get the vernacular correct, it doesn't help.
So one other thing that I wanted just to throw out there, just to get a reaction, we hadn't talked about this prior, something that I saw this morning that I put onto Mystery Wire. Unsolved Mysteries. Coming back on Netflix. You all remember this show? You know the theme song that goes through your head. I'm not going to try to hum it because I'll probably get it wrong. But coming back, and they're going to be dealing with topics straight out of Mystery Wire. So look for that. It's Netflix. We have no association with it, but that's great that that's coming back onto TV.
That was a good show. I was on it a couple of times. Also coming up soon, we don't know the exact date, is season 2 of Unidentified. That's the series sort of that Lou Elizondo is the driving force. He and Tom DeLonge and that team of Chris Mellon and those folks are involved with that. That's coming up soon. The timing of the New York Times and the Unidentified coming back at the same time is interesting. I agree with you, Duncan, that anytime the President of the United States mentions the UFO subject, even if he gets Roswell and Area 51 confused, it is significant. Now, that basically was a tease. Maybe I'll say something and maybe I won't. Maybe I know something and maybe I don't. But anytime he talks about it and doesn't dismiss it out of hand, whether it's on a interview with his son or a talk show or whatever it's on, I sit up and pay notice to that. And, you know, even though he did not give us any answers, maybe he says in the second term he might, I would remind him that Hillary Clinton's had that strategy. It didn't work out very well for her. But, you know, if he wants to open the doors and open up the files, I'm all for it.
So one other thing to go ahead.
You've covered, George, quite a bit over the years because I've seen some of the tapes, some of the stories on presidents and their attitudes towards this. And each have had different attitudes. It seemed to me, Jimmy Carter, if my memory serves me well, at one point declared before he went into the White House that he was going to blow the cover open on it. He was going to reveal it. And then
and someone had the talk with him.
George, it didn't quite happen that way, did it? And you get the impression that, yeah, somebody had a talk with him. Yeah.
Jimmy Carter had a sighting. He had his own UFO sighting. And when he was running for president, he said, look, that's going to, if I get elected, I'm opening up the files. And there was, in the first year of his administration, there was a story in U.S. News and World Report that the government, the White House, was preparing to make startling revelations about the UFO subject, and then poof, it went away. I think NASA pushed back on him and shut it down. We don't know exactly how you tell the President of the United States, keep your mouth shut and don't pay attention to this. But throughout modern history, pretty much all of the presidents have said something or other about UFOs. Gerald Ford, when he was a U.S. congressman, was the Republican leader in the House, pushed for and got congressional hearings into UFOs. Richard Nixon, we're told that he shared the story with Jackie Gleason, his buddy. Gleason was a big UFO buff. He built a house that was shaped like a flying saucer. The story is that Nixon, one dark Florida night, took Jackie Gleason to a hangar at a military base in Florida and showed him a flying saucer and maybe alien bodies. His wife told that story after Gleason died. We know that President Bill Clinton may have been more interested in the subject than any of them, that he pressed his aide, Webb Hubbell. As soon as he got elected, I want to find out two things: who killed JFK and what's the deal with UFOs? And Webster Hubbell tried to find out, but was stymied, as many people have. Barack Obama has joked about it. I don't know what level of interest he had. You can bet that George H.W. Bush is the one president that really knew this stuff because he was head of the CIA at one point and would be in a position to know. Mm-hmm. And his son has also kind of joked about it. And Trump has mostly joked about it. But, I think I'm not sure what kind of briefing those guys get. I think if they really pushed for it, they could get one. I think Ronald Reagan had briefings on it. He made some Really
Didn't-
dramatic statements in public multiple times.
Didn't Ronald Reagan, he had a UFO sighting, didn't he? He saw a Tic Tac. He saw a Tic Tac UFO.
He saw two flying saucers. I think one of them did look like a Tic Tac. He was a governor of California in a plane, and he ordered his pilot to go try to chase this thing. And he made statements multiple times about wouldn't it be something if we were facing an alien threat, how our differences with the USSR would all melt away. Mikhail Gorbachev repeated that back to him. They had an exchange of it. I think presidents, if they want to know, they can get briefed. Whether Trump really wants to know, I don't know. He's got a lot on his plate these days. But I suppose if he pushed hard enough, he could find out more. Interesting. We live in interesting times.
That's right. Now, jumping back a little bit, I just want to make sure before we wrap this up that everyone knows we do have more with Danny Silva that we'll have here on the Mystery Wire website. Some more of the interview. We'll also put out the Wilson Davis document, so you can peruse that at your own pleasure. Other than that, Ron, you got anything else?
No, I think we're going to call this a wrap. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening, and we will try to. When we get back to normal, whatever that is, when we get back to normal, we'll start doing more of these, and we'll be able to have these more often for you. Our goal at some point is to do them weekly. We'll see if we can get that. I know everybody's schedule is tough, but thanks. We appreciate you listening. Spread the word about Mystery Wire. Let people know about it. Let people know who we are, what we do, and we have a lot of fun and approach subjects and topics that you will find nowhere else approached to this level and this degree of journalistic quality. So for George Knapp, Matt Adams, Duncan Phoenix, I'm Ron Futrell, and thanks for listening, everybody. Bye for now.
MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.